Hello and welcome back to Teaching for Success. I'm your host, Rosa Kemirembe, and this is an inclusive podcast series where we look at education through a lens that leaves no one behind. Today we're talking about something that breaks my heart, and I know it breaks yours too, at least some of you. Uganda is very good at getting children into primary school. In fact, our enrollment numbers look quite impressive on paper, but here's the hard truth. 7 out of every 10 children who start primary school never finish. 7 out of 10. This is not a secret. A recent UNESCO report laid it bare. And when we hear statistics like that, we often ask, what is the government doing? And yes, we'll talk about what government can do, but today I want to ask a different question. What can we do? What can the general public, parents, neighbors, businesses, school alumni do without waiting for a policy from the government? Because the truth is, this dropout crisis is not just a government problem, it's a community problem. And it needs a community solution. Let's start with something uncomfortable. We all know that in Uganda, some schools are swimming in resources while others are barely surviving. Why? Because some schools have wealthy parents, powerful alumni, and companies falling over themselves to donate to them. Now, why do companies do that? Often, it's a marketing tool. A business gets its logo on a brand new science lab at a well-known school, and it looks good for their brand. Meanwhile, the school down the road, where the parents are small-scale farmers, where the roof leaks, gets nothing. So here is my first challenge to the general public, especially to corporate leaders and alumni. We need to share school wealth. If your company wants to support education, do not only look at schools that already have gates and fences and swimming pools. Look at the school with no fence. Look at the rural government school with 150 children per teacher. And if you're an alumni, what if your association decided to adopt a struggling school in a neighboring community? Not just send them money once, but commit to a 3-year partnership, fixing classrooms, paying for teachers' training, starting a lunch program that is shared wealth. That is what we call shared wealth. That is inclusion in action. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. Some people will tell you education is a business, and in some ways, they're right. Many schools today are run like businesses. The focus is on profit, on cramming students to pass exams, on competing for the highest number of A's. But when education becomes a business, what happens to the child who cannot afford the extra fees? What happens to the child who learns differently or who needs extra support? They are left behind. We need to remember, a school is not a supermarket. It is a sanctuary for learning. And if we as a community start treating schools, or as a society starts treating schools purely as businesses, we lose sight of why they exist in the first place. So what can the government do? I said we should talk about it because we cannot ignore policy. But I want to frame it in a way that is practical and inclusive. So here are 3 policy ideas that I think would make a real difference. 1 is to cap classroom sizes. Make it a policy to cap classroom sizes. Right now, you'll find classrooms with 100, sometimes 150 children in one room. How can any teacher give individual attention to these kids? How can a child who's struggling even raise their hand? The government needs to set, or Ministry of Education needs to set a maximum class size. Say, the maximum learners for a class, as an educator, I think the maximum I could take and say I'm going to pay attention to all these students is 30. But we're in Uganda, okay? So we're not going to start at a number that is way off base to what is our reality. So say 50 learners per teacher, and enforce it for all schools, public and private. Yes, that means building more classrooms and hiring more teachers. But it also means that schools cannot just keep adding learners without adding resources, okay? The second thing we can do is cap fundraising and redirect generosity. This sounds controversial, but listen, some wealthy schools raise billions of shillings from their communities, far more than they actually need. Meanwhile, neighboring schools cannot afford chalk. So what if government created an incentive? For every school that raises funds beyond a certain amount or a certain level, a percentage must be shared with a partner school in a low-income area. Call it a solidarity levy, or give tax breaks to companies that sponsor struggling schools instead of already rich ones. We can make generosity fair in many cases. The third thing I want us to think about is subsidizing affordable private schools. We know that many parents choose private schools because public schools are overcrowded or far away, but some private schools are genuinely affordable and keep class sizes small. The government or Ministry of Education should identify these schools and subsidize them so that they can remain affordable while paying teachers decent salaries. This is not about privatizing education. It's about partnering with communities who are already solving the problem. But policies alone, they're not enough. If we really want children to stay in school, we must also listen. I want you to imagine a frontline worker, a head teacher in a rural area, a class teacher who knows exactly why children drop out in their villages. Maybe it's hunger, maybe it's early pregnancy, maybe it's because the nearest school is 5 kilometers away and there is no safe transportation. People cannot thrive where problems are unknown. So I call again on our Ministry of Education. Do not just do surveys from Kampala. Go to the districts. Yes, you say you will go, but go to the districts. Sit with the teachers. I don't know how many school inspectors actually sit with the teachers, the frontline workers in schools. I am thinking most of the time they are speaking with the administrators and the school directors. Begin to sit with teachers, sit with parents, and ask them, what does your school need to thrive? Then act on what they say. Teachers are not just implementers, they're experts, and treat them as such. And while we're at it, let's make going to school be the law. Okay, in many countries, you are not going to find kids loitering the streets, okay, when they're above a certain age. So make it a law that from age 5 to 18 or age 5 to 16, make it a law that kids must be in school. And you don't just make a law without supporting the law with resources and investing in the education system so that it is possible for parents to make sure their kids are in school. You can't say you must all attend school if you're age 5 to 18 if the parents can't afford for their kids to go to school. Okay, so we need to support the law. A law without support is just a punishment for parents. So if we make school compulsory, we must make sure that every child has a school to go to, a meal to eat, and a teacher who is trained to handle their needs. Now, let's talk about money, because money is often the reason a child drops out. We all know the promise of universal primary education, free education. But for many families, free does not really mean free. It isn't free. When I heard of UPE, I thought, wow, that's such a great idea. Kids just have to turn up to school and learn, and thrive. But free is not free. Okay? There are uniforms for parents to pay for, books, lunch, transportation, and contributions for one thing or the other. By the time you add it up, a parent with 3 or 4 children is struggling. So I want to make a distinction. The Ministry of Education should provide scholastic materials, books, pens, exercise books at public schools. Truly provide them, no excuses. But let uniforms and food, those can be the responsibility for the parents. But anything that concerns learning, and food does concern learning, but parents have to have some kind of accountability. You had your children, so you have to figure out a way and a plan to make sure that you put them in school, right? You can't put the burden on everyone else but yourself. You chose to have those kids, so you need to do something. You need to contribute in one way or another. I am not happy with parents who just want government or other people to be paying school fees for their kids. What are you doing? You might not be able to pay everything, but you can pay something and you can contribute in one way or the other. So that can be the responsibility of parents, the food and the uniform. However, we must help parents understand that these are not costs to avoid, but investments to prioritize. You are investing in your child. And this is where many of us fail. Not because we are bad parents, but because we have never been taught how to plan for our children's education. We just sit around, wait for them to start school, and then we start scrambling for money to pay school fees. Okay? But here's an idea that could change everything. What if a parent could start saving for their child's education from the day that the child was born? Not by struggling to raise a huge lump sum when school fees are due, but by putting away a small amount every month in a safe place where it grows. This is what registered education plans can do. Banks in Uganda and financial institutions can offer these plans. A parent opens up an account for their newborn and they deposit whatever they can, 10,000 shillings, 20,000 every month. Even if it's 1,000, the bank then invests that money in mutual funds, and over the years it earns interest. Maybe it can be, the bank can have a cap on how much interest, and maybe put in a buffer such that the parent will, at least at the very worst, get what they put in and not lose everything. If they could come up with, some kind of policy or regulation that agrees to that. So if we say that money earns interest, say 6%, 8%, sometimes even 10%, by the time the child is ready to go to secondary school, that small monthly amount and habit has grown into a substantial fund. But here's the catch. Many parents do not know about such plans. Many banks do not know about things like that they could implement with parents. They do not trust banks. They think saving is only for rich people. So banks, financial institutions, and anyone who works in there who are in leadership, I am speaking to you. You have a role in this crisis. Go to the villages, go to the marketplaces, educate people. Show them that even a market vendor can save for their child's future. Create simple, low-cost education plans that do not require huge minimum balances. Train your agents to explain it in plain language, because when a parent knows how to save and sees the value of education, they will prioritize it even when times are hard. And for those of you who say, but Rosa, some parents just don't see the value of education, I agree. And that's a challenge for some parents. Many uneducated parents do not understand the long-term benefits of schooling because they were never experience themselves. So we need community campaigns, not lectures, but conversations. Talk to parents. Let them see former students who now run businesses, who work as nurses, who have broken the cycle of poverty. Show them the link between education and a better life. Let me bring this back to inclusion. When we talk about dropout, we often talk about the child who is hungry, or the girl who gets pregnant, or the child with a disability who cannot access the classroom. These are the children who fall through the cracks. An inclusive approach means we do not just focus on average enrollment numbers. We ask, who is missing? Who is missing in our schools? And we go after them. That is why I am saying, build more public schools. Ministry of Education, please and thank you, with all due respect. Especially in remote areas, and especially at the secondary level. A child should not have to walk 10 kilometers to get to school. A child with a disability should not have to stay at home because the nearest school has no accessible washroom or latrine. And when we build those schools, we should staff them with well-trained teachers. The well-trained teachers should not just be in the city. Teachers who are paid on time, who are given ongoing training, professional development, who are respected. Because no policy, no plan, no building works if the teacher in the classroom is overwhelmed, underpaid, and unsupported. Okay? So let me wrap up by painting a picture of what we could achieve together. This is not just for government. This is not just for parents. This is not just for school owners. This is us as a nation, as a society. Imagine a Uganda where every child, no matter their background, goes to a school with manageable class sizes. Wealthy schools and alumni share their resources with struggling neighbors. Companies sponsor schools not just for marketing, but for impact. Parents start saving for education from the day their child is born using simple bank plans that grow their money. The government listens to teachers, builds enough public schools, and makes free education truly free. And every parent understands that sending a child to school is not a cost. It is the greatest investment they will ever make. This is not a dream. This is possible. It requires all of us, government, private sector, civil society, and each one of us as individuals to act. Thank you for listening to this episode of our Teaching for Success Inclusive podcast series. I'm your host, Rosa Kemirembe. Remember, education is not a business and children are not profits. When we share resources, listen to frontline teachers, and help every parent plan for the future, we keep every child in school, and that is how a nation truly succeeds. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, and keep including.